The alien coalition was a vast and powerful force, stretching across the stars. Their fleets were massive, and their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. They had conquered worlds and subjugated countless civilizations. Their rule was unchallenged, and their dominance unquestioned. They had never once encountered an enemy that had posed a serious threat, and they didn't think they ever would. They were the apex of galactic power. But all of that was about to change when a strange signal emerged from deep space. It wasn't like any communication the Coalition had ever encountered. A human vessel had entered their space. The warship was an anomaly, something out of place. It wasn't large or advanced by alien standards. It was a human design, a strange mix of old technology and new, a ship that had barely been built to match the Coalition's might. But there it was, drifting deeper into their territory. The Coalition's sensors picked up the ship and dismissed it at first. They assumed it was a mistake or a malfunction, maybe a wayward ship or an unimportant cargo vessel. But then something strange happened. The ship didn't turn around. It didn't respond to the usual communication protocols. It continued on its course, steadily heading toward the heart of their space. The leadership of the Coalition gathered in their command center, a place where hundreds of species from across the galaxy convened to decide the fate of countless worlds. Their commanders were calm and confident. A ship this small, this weak, couldn't possibly be a threat. They laughed at the idea of having to deal with it. The ship would be destroyed in an instant. They decided to send a small fleet of scouts just to ensure that the human ship wasn't a part of some larger trap. But it didn't matter. They would eliminate it quickly. However, as the scouts approached the human ship, they noticed something strange. The human vessel wasn't responding to their demands. It didn't even seem to be trying to evade them. They couldn't understand it. It should have been scared. It should have fled. But the human ship simply pressed on, its engines humming steadily. As it cut through space, a signal began to emanate from the ship, a challenge, not a plea for mercy or a sign of surrender. It was a taunt. The human vessel was daring them to engage. The alien commanders felt an unease ripple through their ranks. They were not used to being challenged in such a way. The feeling grew when they saw the human ship change course, suddenly angling itself toward the core of their fleet. They expected it to be an illusion. Maybe the humans had no idea what they were doing, or perhaps it was some kind of subterfuge meant to catch them off guard. But as the human warship drew closer, the feeling of unease turned into something more serious. This was no mistake. This was a calculated move. The humans weren't afraid. They weren't backing down. They were coming straight for them. The alien leadership could no longer ignore the growing tension. Their scouts had reported that the human ship was now locked on their position. It was clear now that the humans had come to make a stand. They were no longer the weak, helpless creatures the Coalition had assumed them to be. They were something else entirely, a force to be reckoned with. And in that moment, the full gravity of the situation hit the aliens. They weren't just facing a lost ship in their space. They were facing a challenge to their entire understanding of galactic order. The alien fleet, composed of ships larger and more powerful than the human vessel, moved into position to intercept the Sovereign. But the longer they observed the human ship, the more the unease grew. It wasn't acting like anything they had ever encountered before. It was audacious in its approach, too calm, almost as if the crew on board had no fear of the mighty fleet arrayed against them. The human ship kept on its trajectory, unwavering, as if it knew exactly what it was doing. The alien commanders began to debate among themselves. Some were eager to destroy the human ship immediately. They saw it as an unnecessary threat, one that could not be allowed to continue its journey into the heart of their territory. Others argued for a more cautious approach. They wanted to learn more about this human vessel before acting. Perhaps it was simply a mistake or a misunderstanding, a crew that had lost its way. But none of them could deny the feeling that something was different about this encounter, something that didn't sit right. Captain Nora Bishop stood at the bridge of the Sovereign, her crew at attention. As the ship neared the first alien warship, she could feel the tension building in the air. The calmness in her own heart was a contrast to the electric atmosphere around her. This wasn't supposed to happen. The human fleet wasn't ready for this. Yet she had no choice but to press forward. She couldn't back down now, not after coming this far. Humanity's future was at stake, and the aliens needed to know that humanity would not bow down to them. Bishop's voice was steady as she gave her orders. The crew worked in sync as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation. They didn't have the firepower of the alien ships. They didn't have the advanced weaponry, but they did have determination and resourcefulness. They would need every bit of it to survive this encounter. The sensors flickered briefly as the first alien ship locked onto their position, but there was no hesitation. The Sovereign fired its engines, hard pushing the ship forward. With a force that was unexpected for its size, the ship swerved and twisted in space, dodging the incoming fire from the alien ships with precision. The alien fleet reacted quickly, but the Sovereign was already gone. The human ship weaved through the alien fire, not with the grace of advanced technology, but with the determination and ingenuity of a crew who refused to be cowed. Bishop didn't need to be the best tactician in the galaxy. She just needed to be better than the alien commanders who underestimated them. The Sovereign was small, but it was nimble, and its crew was just as resourceful. Every move they made was calculated. Every shot fired from their weapons was a statement that they weren't here to be pushed around. The alien ships followed, but they were clumsy. They weren't prepared for a human warship that didn't follow their rules of engagement. They weren't prepared for human persistence. They underestimated the crew's ability to think outside the box, and when the Sovereign turned to face them again, it was with a confidence they hadn't expected. The human ship fired once more, catching an alien warship off guard as the first salvo of missiles pierced the alien ship's shields and sent it into a violent spin. The alien commanders were stunned as they watched their fleet take damage from a human ship they had assumed would be no more than a target for destruction. The Sovereign wasn't the biggest ship or the most powerful, but it was relentless, and as its weapons hit their marks, it became clear that humanity was no longer something to be dismissed. The battle wasn't over, but the aliens were starting to realize they might have miscalculated in underestimating the humans. The alien fleet was in disarray, and the longer the Sovereign stayed in their midst, the more it became apparent that humanity was not an easy opponent. The Sovereign weaved through the chaos, its engines roaring with a fury that matched the crew's resolve. Each maneuver was executed with precision. Each shot fired in answer to the question the aliens had posed when they first entered human space: what would humanity do in the face of overwhelming odds? The answer was simple: fight back. Captain Bishop stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the vast battlefield unfolding outside the bridge windows. The alien ships, enormous and imposing, loomed like giants compared to her own vessel. Yet the Sovereign danced around them with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. The crew was working in perfect unison, their actions a reflection of the countless hours spent preparing for a war they never expected to fight. The ship's weapon systems had been adapted for this very moment, an unconventional style of combat, one that caught the alien commanders off guard. "Report," Bishop said, her voice calm, though her pulse quickened with every near miss. "Shields holding at 70%, Captain," came the response from her tactical officer. "We've inflicted significant damage on 2 of their vessels. One is disabled, and the other is retreating." Bishop nodded, her gaze never leaving the view screen. The aliens, once confident and arrogant in their superiority, were now scrambling to regroup. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight with a tenacity that seemed to defy logic. It wasn't just their technology that had made them a threat. It was their unyielding spirit, something the aliens had no experience with. The alien commanders, watching from their command ships, exchanged words in hushed tones. They had expected the humans to falter, to retreat in the face of superior firepower. But that had not happened. Instead, the Sovereign continued its assault, pushing forward despite the losses it had taken. The aliens were forced to rethink their strategy. A few of them began to doubt their previous assumptions about humanity. Perhaps this was not some minor skirmish after all. Perhaps this human ship was a harbinger of something more. "We need to end this now," one of the alien commanders said, his voice filled with frustration. "We can't afford to waste any more time with these creatures." But another commander, more cautious, raised a hand. "If we strike too quickly, we risk provoking something we don't understand. Their tactics are unorthodox. If we attack without caution, we may lose more ships. The debate was fierce. The alien forces had never been forced into such a defensive position before. Even their most advanced weapon systems were proving ineffective against the Sovereign's unpredictable movements. The human vessel wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of something the aliens hadn't expected: resilience. Back on the Sovereign, the crew felt it too. The tension in the air was palpable, but so was the sense of purpose. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something much larger than themselves. As the battle raged on, they began to realize that what they were doing wasn't just about winning. It was about proving that humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't for anyone to decide but themselves. "Target their flagship," Bishop ordered. "Let's see if we can rattle their command structure." With a fierce burst of energy, the Sovereign angled itself toward the largest alien ship in the fleet. It was a move that could have been seen as reckless, but to the crew, it felt right. It was a statement. If they were going to survive in this galaxy, they had to make the enemy understand that humans were not to be underestimated. They would fight until the very end. As the Sovereign moved forward, the alien ships responded in kind, regrouping to defend their flagship. It was clear that the battle had shifted. No longer was the Sovereign merely a nuisance. It was now the focus of everything the aliens had, and it was proving to be far more difficult to defeat than they had ever imagined. As the Sovereign closed in on the alien flagship, Captain Bishop's mind raced. The stakes had escalated beyond what anyone on her crew could have imagined. What had started as a simple reconnaissance mission had now turned into an all-out conflict with one of the galaxy's most powerful coalitions. Yet there was no turning back now. The alien forces had shown they were more than willing to annihilate humanity if given the chance. If they were going to survive, they needed to strike decisively. "Incoming fire," shouted the tactical officer, snapping Bishop back to the present. The alien flagship, now the primary target, unleashed a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the void of space. The Sovereign shook under the assault, the ship's shields flaring as they absorbed the brunt of the impact. The crew gritted their teeth, knowing that the damage was beginning to add up. They couldn't afford many more hits like that. Bishop's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the situation. The flagship was powerful, its energy weapons capable of decimating entire fleets, but it had a glaring weakness: its engines. From the intelligence they had gathered, the Sovereign knew that a concentrated strike to the flagship's propulsion systems could cripple the entire fleet. The Sovereign had already dealt blows to smaller alien ships, but this was their most critical target. If they took down the flagship, they would not only cripple the alien military's leadership, but also send a shockwave through their ranks. "Helm, take us in close," Bishop commanded. "Prepare to target their engines. We've got one shot at this." The crew worked swiftly, the ship veering toward the flagship with renewed purpose. The alien fleet responded, tightening their formation around the flagship, determined to protect it at all costs. The Sovereign darted through their defensive lines, narrowly avoiding shots that would have torn it apart, but the human ship was nimble and unpredictable. With a burst of power, it shot forward, closing the distance in a way the alien fleet hadn't anticipated. "We're in range, Captain," the weapons officer said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Firing on your mark." "Fire," Bishop ordered. A precise volley of missiles rocketed from the Sovereign's launchers, heading straight for the alien flagship's vulnerable engines. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow as the projectiles hurtled toward their target. Then, with a deafening explosion, the flagship's rear section erupted in a violent blaze. The shockwave rippled through space, sending alien ships scrambling in all directions to avoid the debris. The flagship's engines went dark, and the massive vessel began to drift, unable to maintain its position. "Direct hit. Their engines are down, Captain," the tactical officer exclaimed. "They're disabled." The crew erupted in cheers, but Bishop's expression remained focused. This was just one victory in a much larger struggle. The alien fleet was reeling, but they weren't defeated yet. Their remaining ships were now desperate. launching frantic attempts to regroup and counterattack. "Now we push," Bishop said, her voice unwavering. "Don't give them a chance to recover. Engage all remaining targets." With the flagship neutralized, the Sovereign turned its attention to the remaining alien ships. But the tide had shifted. The aliens, no longer operating with the certainty of their earlier confidence, began to break ranks. Some ships attempted to flee, their commanders unwilling to face further humiliation. Others turned on each other, realizing that without the leadership of the flagship, their unity was fractured. The human ship, small and seemingly insignificant just hours ago, had become a symbol of defiance and strength. In the command center of the alien fleet, panic began to set in. "This can't be happening," one of the commanders muttered as he watched their forces crumble. "How could we have let this go so wrong?" The battle was not over, but for the first time, the humans had the upper hand. The alien leadership realized they had made a grave error in underestimating their adversary. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. The Sovereign had proven something the aliens had never expected. That humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Bishop's heart raced as she watched the alien fleet fall into chaos. They had taken down their first flagship, but they knew this was just the beginning of a much larger struggle. Still, one thing was clear. Humanity had proven they would fight for their place in the stars. And for the first time, the alien commanders began to wonder if they had underestimated the humans in more ways than one. As the Sovereign continued its relentless assault, the alien fleet began to break apart, its once unified formation splintering under the pressure of the human ship's persistence. The flagship, now a drifting hulk, had been a symbol of the alien coalition's power, but it was no longer functional. In its place, a dozen alien vessels scrambled to reorient, retreating or trying to regroup in smaller clusters. It was clear that the humans had struck a devastating blow, one that had torn apart the very heart of the alien military leadership. But as victory seemed within reach, Bishop knew they couldn't afford to let up. "Captain," said the communications officer, his voice laced with concern, "we're picking up a massive signal from the far side of the fleet. It's a distress call, but it's strange. There's something off about it." Bishop frowned, glancing over at her tactical officer. "What do you mean, something off?" "It's not a standard distress signal, Captain," the officer replied. "It's a warning. It's from one of their higher-ups, possibly the Supreme Commander." Bishop felt a chill run down her spine. She knew this battle was far from over, but hearing the words Supreme Commander changed everything. The alien coalition had many powerful fleets, but the presence of their highest command meant that a larger retaliation was imminent. "Patch it through," Bishop said. A distorted voice crackled through the speakers, almost too faint to make out, but the message was clear. "This is not the end, human. You have angered the wrong force. We will send you to the void. The death you have caused will pale in comparison to what is coming for you." The message was a threat, but it wasn't just any threat. It was a promise of devastation. "Captain," the tactical officer spoke again, his voice more urgent this time. "We're reading a new fleet. Massive. They're warping in from the far side of the system. Their ships are much larger than anything we've faced so far." Bishop's mind raced. The alien commanders had clearly underestimated humanity's resolve. But now, it seemed they were calling in their final, most formidable force. The battle that had already seemed impossible was about to escalate to new, terrifying heights. "Status of our weapons?" Bishop asked, locking eyes with her weapons officer. "Most of our weapons are still operational, but our energy reserves are down to 30%, Captain," came the reply. "We're running on fumes here." Bishop knew they couldn't afford to wait. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Get us out of their direct firing range. We need to buy some time for repairs. But don't stop firing. We fight until the last drop of fuel." With a steady hand, Bishop directed the Sovereign into a series of rapid, erratic maneuvers, throwing off the targeting systems of the approaching alien fleet. The ship zigzagged through space, dodging incoming fire from the advancing ships, which were beginning to fire with unrelenting intensity. The Sovereign's remaining weaponry retaliated with quick, pinpoint shots, targeting weaker alien ships, but the new fleet was overwhelming in size and firepower. "We need to hold them off long enough to make repairs, or we're dead in the water," Bishop muttered under her breath, even as she barked orders at her crew. The alien ships, sleek and imposing, began to surround the Sovereign, closing in from all sides. Their weapons fired in perfect coordination, a blinding rain of laser fire and plasma bolts that threatened to tear the human ship apart. The Sovereign's shields flickered dangerously, struggling to hold up under the intense barrage. "Shields at 20%, Captain," the communications officer reported. Bishop's heart pounded. Every second counted now. The Sovereign was barely holding together, its hull shaking with every impact, but the crew refused to give up. Even as the ship rattled and groaned, they'd fought on. Every crew member, every officer on the bridge, was putting everything they had into this moment. For humanity. For their survival. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, we've got a massive energy signature incoming," said the sensor officer. It's not a weapon. It's a ship." The crew froze, uncertain of what was happening. Bishop's heart skipped a beat. Another ship. Was this some kind of reinforcement for the alien fleet? But as the blinding light of the incoming ship grew larger, it became clear it wasn't one of the alien ships. The shape, the markings were unmistakable. A second human warship, the Valiant, had arrived. The crew of the Sovereign could hardly believe their eyes. The Valiant had come just in time to even the odds. "Message from the Valiant," the communications officer said, voice shaking with disbelief. "They're requesting immediate coordination. They'd got firepower to match their fleet." Bishop let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The Valiant had come. The reinforcements humanity had so desperately needed had arrived. With the Sovereign and the Valiant working together, they could hold their ground. The aliens weren't just facing one ship anymore. They were facing the united human front. "Let's show them what humanity can do," Bishop muttered, her gaze locked on the alien fleet. The battle was far from over, but humanity had just gained a fighting chance. The arrival of the Valiant was a game changer. As the massive warship entered the battlefield, its heavy guns began to fire with devastating precision, adding another layer of destruction to the already reeling alien fleet. The Sovereign, with its own weapons exhausted but still operational, sensed its movements with the Valiant, both ships working in tandem, a seamless dance of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. "Captain," the tactical officer said, his voice filled with renewed hope, "the Valiant is providing cover. We've got a few moments to breathe, but we need to act quickly before they regroup." Bishop nodded, her eyes scanning the chaotic battlefield. The alien forces, though staggered, were far from finished. The new fleet that had arrived to crush the Sovereign now found itself facing the combined might of two human warships. Still, the aliens were relentless. They weren't about to back down. And the Valiant wasn't invulnerable. Its shields were already showing signs of strain under the onslaught. "Status on their reinforcements?" Bishop asked, turning to the communications officer. "They've called for backup," came the reply. "We're detecting several more ships on the way, but they're still several minutes out." "That gives us just enough time," Bishop said, her mind working at full speed. "We're going to need to hit them hard, fast, and disrupt their command structure again. If we can break their morale, they'll falter." The Sovereign and Valiant exchanged fire with the alien ships, their coordinated assault leaving craters in the enemy lines. But the alien fleet, despite the damage, was still formidable. They had the numbers and the firepower to overwhelm the humans, if they were given the time to regroup and re-establish their defensive formation. "Captain," the sensor officer said, his tone alarmed, "we've got a massive warship warping in. It's bigger than anything we've seen before. It's a command ship. It's not just a fleet. It's their final strike." Bishop's pulse quickened as the sheer size of the new ship appeared on the sensors. It dwarfed even the alien flagship they had destroyed earlier. This was a do-or-die moment. The Sovereign was battered, its energy reserves dangerously low. The Valiant wasn't much better off, but they had no choice. If they didn't strike now, the tide would turn against them. "Reassign power to forward shields," Bishop ordered. "We're going straight for their command ship, full speed ahead." The crew moved with efficiency, their actions almost mechanical as they reallocated energy to the necessary systems. The Sovereign accelerated toward the new enemy vessel, weapons charging, while the Valiant covered their approach, launching a series of calculated missile strikes to keep the alien ships at bay. As they neared the command ship, the alien fleet grew more desperate, launching coordinated barrages of energy blasts to intercept their path. The Sovereign weaved through the storm of fire, its evasive maneuvers tight and calculated. Bishop's grip on the command chair tightened as the enemy fire got closer. It was a battle of precision. Every shot had to count. Then, they were within range. Bishop's hand slammed down on the weapon system's controls. "Fire everything we've got," she commanded. The Sovereign unleashed its remaining missiles, each one targeting weak points in the alien command ship's armor. The weapons of the Valiant followed suit, filling the void with a symphony of explosions. The alien command ship's shields flared and flickered, struggling to keep up with the onslaught. A missile barrage hit its central core, sending shockwaves through the vessel. "Direct hit, Captain," the tactical officer shouted. "Their core is unstable. We've damaged their command center." For a moment, the Sovereign pulled back, allowing the alien command ship to drift. The massive warship wavered as its hull buckled under the assault. Bishop's heart raced. This was the critical moment. "Engage now." Bishop barked, her eyes locked on the struggling alien command ship. "Finish them off." The Sovereign surged forward once more, this time at full power, targeting the alien ship's bridge. As it closed in, the Valiant let loose another volley, striking the command ship's weak points with precision. The alien ship, caught between the human ships, began to buckle and explode from within. It was clear. It was done. A final explosion erupted as the command ship's core detonated in a cataclysmic burst of energy. The shockwave reverberated across the battlefield, sending nearby alien vessels scattering. The flagship of their fleet was no more. The leadership that had coordinated the alien forces was obliterated in the blink of an eye. "We did it," the communications officer breathed, as the remnants of the alien fleet began to retreat. The tide of the battle had turned decisively. But Bishop wasn't celebrating yet. There were still alien ships in the vicinity, and though their leadership had been shattered, the war wasn't over. The remaining alien vessels would need to be wiped out to ensure the safety of humanity. "Stay focused," Bishop said, her voice calm but firm. "We've won this battle, but we're not done yet. Let's finish this." The explosion of the alien command ship sent ripples of shock through the battlefield. The remaining alien vessels, now leaderless and disorganized, struggled to maintain any semblance of order. The Sovereign and Valiant moved with deadly intent, relentless in their pursuit of victory. However, Bishop knew that this was only one battle in a much larger war. The aliens wouldn't just give up. They would regroup, reassess, and find new ways to strike back. "Captain," the sensor officer called out, "we're picking up more alien vessels warping in. It's not just reinforcements. They're sending out scout ships, probably trying to assess the damage and prepare for another wave." Bishop's jaw tightened. They were far from done. The alien fleet was retreating for now, but this wouldn't be over until the final enemy ship was destroyed. She turned to the tactical officer. "We can't let them regroup. Let's make sure they know the price of trying to face humanity." The Sovereign and Valiant were already in pursuit, taking full advantage of the disarray in the alien ranks. The smaller scout ships were no match for the human warships, and with their command ship destroyed, the alien forces seemed to have lost their will to fight. "Target the stragglers," Bishop ordered. "Make it clear that humanity doesn't let enemies escape." The Sovereign's cannons fired again, picking off the alien ships with surgical precision. Each strike was devastating, sending enemy vessels careening out of control before exploding into fiery fragments. The Valiant followed closely behind, supporting the Sovereign and finishing off any survivors. It was a clean sweep. But as the battle wore on, the tactical officers continued to monitor the battlefield, their screens flickering with warnings. The enemy was not as shattered as it seemed. "Captain, we've got incoming." A new wave of alien ships, much larger. They're coming from the far edge of the system. Bishop's heart skipped a beat. It had been expected, but now it was here. An even larger fleet, seemingly intent on overwhelming the remaining human forces. The Sovereign's energy reserves were dangerously low, and the Valiant was not much better off. They couldn't hold out against a fleet of that size for long. "We've got to hold them off long enough for reinforcements," Bishop muttered. "Can we still make use of our remaining missiles?" The weapons officer nodded grimly. "We've got a limited number, Captain, but we can still use them. However, after that, we'll be relying solely on energy weapons." "Get those missiles ready," Bishop ordered. "We'll hit them hard before they can even enter the range of our fire." As the alien ships surged forward, the Sovereign and Valiant lined up side by side, their combined firepower a daunting sight. The remaining missiles were fired in a coordinated assault, each one targeting the incoming wave's weak points. The missiles streaked through space, causing enormous explosions as they struck alien vessels. Some ships crumpled under the force, while others veered off course, helpless in the face of the onslaught. Yet, despite the destruction, the alien fleet kept coming. They were clearly committed to ending this conflict, to eradicating humanity before they could spread any further. Their ships, although smaller in number, were formidable in design. Bristling with weaponry, their movements more deliberate. They had learned from the mistakes of the past few hours. They had underestimated the humans once, but not again. Bishop's eyes scanned the battlefield, her thoughts racing. The Sovereign was wounded, its shields weakening with each passing second. The Valiant was no better off. But the two ships had something the aliens didn't: unity. The Sovereign and Valiant had been forged in the crucible of war, each crew member trusting the other implicitly. Together, they were a force greater than the sum of their parts. "Prepare for close combat," Bishop ordered. "We're not letting them get any closer. The moment they enter our range, we take them out." The two human warships closed in on the alien fleet, their weapons fully charged. The aliens, sensing the shift in momentum, attempted to scatter, but it was too late. The Sovereign and Valiant unleashed a blistering barrage of energy fire, blasting apart the alien ships one by one. But just as Bishop felt a surge of hope, a new development appeared on her sensor display. A massive ship, far larger than the previous fleet, emerged from the darkness of space. This was no mere command ship. It was something much more advanced, its sleek design and sheer size making it seem almost like a mobile fortress. "Captain, this is it," the tactical officer said, his voice filled with awe and fear. "That ship is their ultimate weapon. If we don't stop it, this entire fleet will be unstoppable." Bishop's eyes locked onto the incoming behemoth. This was the final test. She had to win. "Get us closer," she commanded. "We'll take it down or die trying." With a burst of power, the Sovereign and Valiant surged toward the alien flagship. The ultimate battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. The massive alien flagship loomed ahead, dwarfing the Sovereign and Valiant as the two human warships approached with grim determination. The size of the ship was staggering. Its hull was lined with armor plating capable of withstanding direct hits from the most powerful energy weapons. Every inch of the ship exuded power, making it clear that this was the alien fleet's final play, their trump card. Bishop's mind raced. They had already pushed beyond their limits, but this was a different kind of fight. The Sovereign was battered, its shields flickering weakly. The Valiant was in no better condition. They had to take down this behemoth, or everything they had fought for, their families, their planet, their very survival, would be lost. "Captain, this ship is like nothing we've encountered before," the sensor officer reported. "It's got an advanced deflector system that's making it nearly impossible to lock onto weak spots. Any attempt to fire directly will be ineffective." Bishop's grip tightened on the command chair. They couldn't afford to waste time trying to break through the enemy's defenses with brute force. She needed a new strategy, a way to outsmart them, just as they had done before. "Helm, bring us in low and fast," she ordered, her voice sharp and steady despite the overwhelming pressure. "We'll take the fight to them at close range." The Sovereign and Valiant executed a sudden turn, diving toward the massive alien ship with astonishing speed. The alien flagship responded immediately, its energy weapons charging up, but the two human ships were too quick. They darted to the side, avoiding the incoming fire by the skin of their teeth. The Sovereign's shields flared under the barrage, absorbing most of the damage. But the ship's integrity was weakening by the second. "Ready all remaining energy blasts," Bishop barked. "Target their engines. We need to cripple them before they have a chance to fire on us again." With deadly precision, the Sovereign and Valiant unleashed a synchronized volley, energy weapons streaking across the void and slamming into the alien ship's central propulsion systems. The flagship shuddered under the assault, its engines flickering as the blasts tore into the hull. The alien ship's defensive shields began to fail, and for a brief moment, the two human warships had a clear opening. "Captain, their shields are collapsing," the tactical officer shouted. "We've got a chance." Bishop wasted no time. "Fire everything," she commanded, her voice unwavering. Both ships unleashed their full complement of weapons, missiles, plasma cannons, energy blasts, all converging on the alien flagship's now undefended core. The alien ship erupted in a blinding explosion, its outer hull cracking apart like a fragile egg under the weight of humanity's fury. But the true devastation came when the flagship's core detonated, sending out a shockwave that rattled the Sovereign and Valiant to their very foundations. The alien fleet, without its command ship, fell into complete chaos. The remaining vessels began to scatter, their morale shattered by the destruction of their ultimate weapon. Some ships tried to flee, while others turned on each other, unable to function without their leadership. "Victory is within our reach," Bishop murmured, her eyes scanning the battlefield. But she knew better than to let her guard down. The battle wasn't over until every enemy ship was either destroyed or forced to surrender. "Captain," the communications officer said, his voice full of relief, "the alien forces are retreating. Their remaining ships are breaking formation and heading out of the system." The remaining enemy fleet, crippled and disoriented, began to warp out, their strategic advantage all but gone. The Sovereign and Valiant hung in the silent aftermath of the battle, the stars once again eerily calm. Bishop leaned back in her chair, exhaustion settling in her bones. But the battle was won. They had done the impossible. The alien invasion had been repelled, and humanity had proven itself more than capable of defending its place in the stars. "Inform the crew," Bishop said, her voice quiet but filled with pride. "We've won this battle, but the war is far from over. We've shown the galaxy that humanity won't back down, no matter the odds." As the Sovereign and Valiant drifted in the aftermath of the battle, the crew began to regroup, their weary faces filled with quiet pride. They had survived the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that had believed itself to be unstoppable. For now, humanity's place in the galaxy was secure, but Bishop knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there would be more battles to come, but humanity had made its mark. And as the stars stretched out before them, they knew they would never be the same again.